we really need a Valve controller. This is Dragon Age Origins, running on a Steam Deck. For those who don't know, Dragon Age Origins is a PC game that has zero controller support. Despite it also coming out on the consoles, the PC version has no controller support. But if you're willing to take the time to either look at some community layouts or to build your own layout, you can definitely play it with the controller input on the Steam Deck. You can go to Steam, go to controller settings, and in here you've got all sorts of different options. So let me show you some of the things that I've set up. Besides the normal Xbox controls on the Steam Deck, it also has two trackpads. The joysticks themselves are touch sensitive, so you can use the act of touching as an input to trigger something or do something. And we've also got 4 paddles on the back that are not just like macros for the existing buttons. They are their own independent keys that can be mapped to do certain things. And we've also got these trackpads that you can, like this one I've got set to be a mouse, but this one I have set to be a radial menu, and you can see here that I've got it mapped to be 1 through 0, which means that if I cast number 1, it uses that ability. Now, you can do this thing with Steam Input called mode shifts, where you could say, alright, normally this does my 1 through 0. But in my case, if I press and hold R4, this now becomes a different menu that I've created, where I can do things like bring up my inventory, bring up my tactics menu, the map, things of that nature. Now, normally the way you look around in Dragon Age Origins is you can either just rotate your character or you hold right click with the mouse and drag your mouse around. So the way I've mapped that to a joystick is I mapped touching my right joystick to right click. And so I can put my mouse somewhere and touching this holds right click, and then moving it moves my camera. There's also haptic feedback, so I've got it set. I don't know if you can hear this or not. Let me turn the game volume all the way down. But when I touch this right joystick, I've got a little bit of haptic feedback. So I've got a little bit of a vibration feedback to tell me, like, okay, the right click has registered. And I've got obviously the left joystick just set to my WAS and D keys. And I've got, my mouse. I've got these triggers. These are set to zoom in, zoom out. I've got my right trigger set to a normal click. I've got my left trigger set to right click, so I can move around easily with the mouse pointer if I want. Just a whole lot of input options that makes it relatively simple, honestly. I've got select set to clear my HUD. I've got start set to be my menu. I've got A set to pause combat. And so a lot of stuff becomes super simple with Steam Input because we have touch sensitive joysticks, trackpads, back paddles, things of that nature. So here's the competition. We'll start with the Xbox Series controller. This one's pretty good. It has a dedicated screenshot button where even the Steam Deck you have to do like Steam and R1 to take a screenshot. But the joysticks are not touch sensitive. You just have your standard face buttons, your standard shoulder buttons and triggers. No paddles unless you go shell out like a bunch of money for the Pro controller. And so a lot of the features that I'm able to do on this, I can't do with this because it doesn't have touch sensitive joysticks. It doesn't have the trackpads. It doesn't have the back paddles that I'm using to trigger things. The DualSense comes pretty close. The joysticks are not touch sensitive, so I would have to do some more configuring and fiddling with the controls to be able to move my camera around, because you don't want right click held down constantly. You need to be able to like click on objects and areas. So, but I can't map touching the joystick to right clicking because they're not touch sensitive. It doesn't have back paddles, again, unless you go spend a boatload of money on their Pro version. The touchpad, though, does show up in Steam as something that can be segmented off to be like left and right trackpad, but it takes up much less real estate than the trackpads on the Steam Deck, and it seems a bit less accurate when you try to cut it into 2 regions like this, because you've only got like this little bit of space to do all of your stuff. And I'm not sure if it's maybe the trapezoidal shape to it or what, but when you try to cut it into 2 trackpads here to sort of mimic the trackpads on the Steam Deck, it's not quite as accurate or useful, so I don't usually use it for anything of that nature. Like, for example, if you've got it cut into regions and you try to type with this, it seems like I can get my mouse to move a lot farther and more accurately with these than I can with this. So I said all that to say this again. We need a valve controller. We need this minus the screen in sort of, this size that we can Bluetooth to, a Steam Deck, a PC, or whatever, and have touch-sensitive joysticks and trackpads and the back paddles and things of that nature. We need this controller in this form factor that we can use with other things. So get on it, Valve. Let's rock and roll.